Thank you very much for the invitation. And Stephen, thank you very much for a very interesting presentation. Stephen and I, we have a lot of discussions actually, and I think they are very fruitful. And I'm so happy for you making clear that there are different views and different ways of researching the field, and also the questions from the audience here. It depends upon what kind of questions do you ask, what kind of databases do you look into, and so on. And I think that is the amazing and great thing about the IMERS, in which Rigmor and all of us are part of, because we are actually opening up for these questions. And we are struggling, and we don't have one answer, we have several answers, and we have different angles. And this kind of collaboration is very fruitful, because I think it pushes us to be more creative, more critical, and also try to invent, future ways of working together across faculties, across professions, and across research stands. So thank you very much for the opportunity to be here today. Sorry, I'll go back to this one, like this. Learning and Embodied Cognition was the title, in XR, it was the title of this presentation. And Marte Gulliksen and me, we've been working together for a couple of years now. And Marte was supposed to be here today. However, she has been granted with a lot of money in another research project. So she is the leader and been researching the embodied cognition perspectives. But she's not here today, so you're stuck with me, which will talk more about learning in extended realities. And I think that I've also read a bit into these embodied cognition perspectives, and they're really promising. So I will not have a presentation for you, because Marte is the one that knows a lot, and you will probably meet her later on. So what I would like to say today is something about learning with an historical background. We look into sociology. We look into these concepts of continuity and discontinuity related to, is this extended reality old news in a new wrapping? And I will bring in 2 examples of research projects that we're working on right now. Yeah, so how can we understand extended realities within education? Is it only old ideas in new wrapping? Well, it depends upon, what kind of perspectives you bring in, how you design the experiments, how you look into it, and how you make use of both the technologies, but also what kind of questions you keep on asking. And I think that if you want to explore new things when it comes to understanding extended realities, especially into the education, you have to start to ask different questions. So, since I'm into the learning and perspectives related to learning and assessment, I think that I will bring in 3 minutes the whole history of learning. Of course, it will be quite superficial, but it might, give us an idea about these issues of thinking about old ideas in a new wrapping. So here we go. Very early, we were talking about teaching machines. And Skinner was one of the first ones. And if you would like to go into this YouTube movie, it's really amazing, 5 minutes. And you can look into how these young students, questi giovani studiano in una maniera nuova. It means that, this is how these young students are studying in a new manner. And what is really cool is that they are actually sitting in kind of a typing machines. And they're sitting next to each other, and this is the new way of working, you know, of inventing technologies. And I think it's fun because it is necessary to know the past to build a better future. And if we look into the 3 theses of behaviorism, it says that, you know, the building blocks are into these classic or operant conditions. And these are the building blocks of any forms of learning. So even if you're going to learn skills in you know, how to maneuver something, or very complex knowledge, you build on the same ideas. And the laws of learning are equal to all species. So what you do with rats or birds or dogs, you can transfer it directly into humans. Yeah? And learning, it always starts with external or environmental factors. These 3 overarching themes are quite difficult, especially if you look into humans and ethics. And Skinner were later criticized, you know, for doing horrible things related to human beings and also his own children. However, you know, it might be an idea to critique the traditional school. Because when we look into these kind of rooms where education and learning was supposed to happen, I think we can look into this room, not the big differences, right? So we're sitting in rows, I'm here in front of you, we're looking on a screen or a blackboard board, and I'm the one who owes the knowledge. I'm the one, you know, who's going to tell you something. However, I guess that you have a lot of knowledge as well. And what if we share it, you know, if we work together? I think that we would come a lot further. And when it comes to cognitivism and constructivism, you know, they were often, or almost always, looking into how individuals construct their own knowledge. So if we create these bullets again, you know, knowledge of students are related to levels and conditions. So it was a lot of very interesting experiments, which is also quite normal within this paradigm, that you use experiments with children and all the stages in which Piaget made use of. And then you looked into complexity. You know, you started on really low complexity, and then you climbed the stages, and it was related to your age. So often the student active forms, in which we also hear a lot of today and in these days, is that we have to look into learning as activity, experience, and repetition. And if this is the way that we organize the learning activities, you know, children and youth will learn. You know? That is a way of assessing it. And it is so that cognitivism and constructivism has a strong influence on the last decades of school reforms. And these perspectives are also present when we're talking about technologies and innovation. The perspectives in which we are, which is more present today, is the social-cultural perspectives. And it was a critique of the individual cognitive perspectives. And it was Dewey and Vygotsky, in which you've probably seen before. They were talking about that learning is a social process, not only something individuals engage in alone. Knowledge is not stored in individual brains. We participate in learning activities. We use mediating tools or signs. And tools could be both a pen, your cell phone, or extended reality, machines. And language is the primary tool for learning. And through language, we think, and we have this higher order thinking. We internalize and think through languages and our experiences. And development cannot be separated from its social context where it is situated. This was the 5 minutes of learning theories. I see that some of you are smiling and nodding and happy for that. It seems like you're familiar with these perspectives. I'd like to bring in some perspectives from a very good colleague of mine, Charlotte Selberg. She's working at the University of Gothenburg, and she has also written quite a lot within this field of particularly simulator-based training, and within the context of maritime, but also other professions right now. And she has made kind of a timeline where we could see particularly the pedagogic perspectives on technologies have emerged from devices to digital ecosystems. It means that in the early 70s and 80s, we were looking at the technology per se. What benefits can we make use of with the calculator, the computer, and so on? What changes can the machines do? Whilst from 2010 until 2020, we were looking more about into the digital ecosystems. We will look into how do we make use of, how do we engage? How do we create meaning when we make use of various tools, and where the technology is one of them? What happens? What happens when we engage with these new environments? And how are we going to measure? How are we going to understand what actually happens? So the question in pedagogical perspective is how? How are we going to understand learning activities when the context around us is changing? How are we going to understand how groups of youth participate when they wear goggles, when they are into simulated areas, when they're surrounded with pictures, holograms, formulas, and so on? How are we going to create new learning activities that builds on what we know, but we need to invent other ways of assessing them? We need to find other ways of creating activities in order to meet these how questions. And what we often see when it comes to talking about extended reality and learning is that we see dichotomies, on the one side and the other. There's a gap, there's a hole, there's something that we need to tighten up or figure out. It's a black box out there. Well, I try to look at it differently. I would like to look into the connections. What is it that actually connects us? How do we actually make meaning across these gaps or bridges? How can we understand how we as human creatures engage? Because we are actually engaging with various kinds of technologies and tools every day. So how do we make use of all these experiences when we engage in new practices? This is my son. He's 13. And for 4 days ago, this Oculus Quest goggles came into the mailbox. He saved his money for many years. So when it came with PostNord, it was like Christmas 5 times. It was his biggest day. And I think also that this is very, very interesting if we look into society. Because when 13-year-old boys want to spend the money to buy Oculus Quest and be engaged with this kind of technologies, I think we have to open up and look into how can we make use of youth knowledge and experience from their leisure time activities or their informal learning communities as resources for learning. Because these kids are the future. You know? The way they make use of these goggles and other kind of technologies when it is interest-based. You know, this is not something he has to do. It's something he volunteers to do. He saves all his money. You know, he's wondering, should I buy a snowboard or should I buy these goggles? Oh, I can go for the goggles. No? And that is interesting. I look forward to following him, because what kind of content is it that he wants to buy, make use of, and see as interesting? Who is he going to collaborate with? He has a friend a couple of blocks up in the street who also has these ones. And last night I heard them talk. They were participating in the same game, talking English, even though they are Norwegian kids. And they were probably also engaging together with some other kids. You know, I think they were not talking Norwegian, since they all were talking English. And they had this really interesting conversation of how to accomplish a game. I tried to ask him after on what kind of game it was, and he said just, "Mom, you don't understand anything." And I don't. But he tried to introduce me, you know? And I think this is very important. Mom, you don't understand anything. So how can I try to connect? How can I try to engage and understand what these youth actually do? And I'm not going to put on the goggles like and try out and you know, get into and spy to try to do the same things as he's doing. But I would like to take a position, you know, as one that try to explore, try to look into and try to ask questions. You know, what do you do? How did you buy that one? How did you download it? What do you do? How do you talk? How do you engage? How do you negotiate meaning within these areas in which you find so interesting that you want to? It's the first thing he's doing in the morning now. Gets up, put on his clothes, put on the goggles. Then he runs up and have 2 slices of bread, and then it's on with the goggles again. It's the first thing he does when he comes back from school. You know, this is part of, you know, youth lives right now. So maybe in a year I can tell you something more. I'm going to bring 2 examples. One of them is from a project from the Norwegian Research Council. We received 14 million in this project, which is called Professional Education and Simulation-Based Training. And it could be an example of how to make use of extended realities and simulators and tools within professional learning. And what we're going to do is that we're investigating technology-supported simulation-based training in maritime, health, and biomedical laboratory science. And the 3 fields are chosen because, despite structural similarities, there are significant differences in how simulation-based training is implemented and used in practical training and assessment practices. So this is the first study where we try to look into simulated practices across professions. It is a Nordic collaboration. ProSim gathers researchers from 3 Nordic universities At the top, it's representatives from the University of Gothenburg. It is our university of southeastern Norway, and it is NTNU, particularly from Ålesund and Trondheim. It is down on the left-hand side, Marte Fanneløv. She is the project leader. And together with both different universities that we come from, different perspectives and different professions, we're trying to investigate this field. And the overall project aim is to advance our understanding of simulation-based training across professional setting in ways that can improve the quality of simulation-based training. And the reason why I bring it in here, where the extended reality is the focus, is because simulations are also extended, and we see across these professions that a lot of different tools are used. In particularly, our interest is to explore the relationship between simulations and the social, emotional, and cognitive dimensions for practice, and to develop professional identity. The project involves forums for learning across domains and discussion both within academia and with the three practice fields. Thus, the ambition of ProSim is to stimulate cross-disciplinary learning of best practices as well as shared systems of concepts. For instance, in maritime bachelor education, simulators are used for certifying technical skills to formally qualify for international competence requirements for the industry. Whereas in bachelor level education in healthcare, simulators are used for preparations before the start of practice periods in the health services, while in laboratory science, advanced simulation technologies have recently entered the educational field through highly immersive virtual reality technologies. And within these different professions, they make use of simulations in different ways. How can we learn from each other? How can we bring best practices into these professional developments? We draw on situated, distributed, and social cultural theories to study professional learning as interactional accomplishments between participants and simulation technologies in everyday simulation practice. And this is different from what, for instance, Stephen presented earlier. So what we do is that we look into authentic learning activities and explore their complexity. So our aim is not to reduce complexity and try to create experiments that look into smaller parts. It is to explore the complexity in naturalistic settings. So I think, Stephen, that our projects can really be interesting in giving different results and findings, and start creating these very interesting research talks and collaborations. Simulation-based training is a widespread method to improve the quality of practice in a risk-free and cost-effective manner across different professional fields. And through innovative and interdisciplinary research, the project group investigates technology-supported simulation-based training on bachelor-level education in the three fields. And Stephen was actually presenting some data from a literature review. And that is quite common, when you start a project, that you go through existing literature in the field. And we have started to do some of the same things. We have a paper which is in progress, which me and Charlotte Sellberg and Mats Solberg is the authors behind. It's called Tracing Conceptual Discussions of Simulation-Based Learning in Maritime Higher Education. And the corpus for the analysis consists of 87 articles on simulator-based training and assessment. And they're sampled from 3 journals. From the Journal of Navigation, the VMU Journal of Maritime Affairs, and Transnav, the International Journal of Marine Navigation and Safety of Sea Transportation. And they are dating back to 1961 until today. And the reason why choosing 3 specific articles is also something that Stephen were touching, and questions from the audience as well. How do we look into databases? How do we navigate among the thousands of articles which are out there? Well, our approach is, as you can see on the right-hand side, that we wanted to identify relevant journals, because there is a lot of journals out there. So by picking these 3 journals where there is many references, they are often referred to, and within the community they are often seen as the most difficult journals to get publications into. So we were also looking for search words like simulator and or simulation in the journal's search engine. So we're looking particularly into the journal, and not into the databases. Articles including the keywords training and assessment were included. Duplicates were excluded. Included articles were downloaded as PDFs, and there were 87 of them. And articles were organized in folders based on publication year and journal. Then we used WordStat and Provalis to do a topic extraction using non-negative matrix factorization. And we had an exploration of quantitative topic using the quantitative topic model. We had an identification of salient topics in exemplary documents, and a qualitative analysis of conceptual structures will be done during the next months. However, I thought it would be interesting to display some of our early findings. The preliminary results from running the first topic models show an educational field dominated by human factors research and much concerned with industry standards and certification. Furthermore, preliminary results from topic modeling show that learning as a topic in maritime simulator-based training and assessment occurs for the first time in 1980. But that the concept of learning did not emerge as a central topic in the literature until 2012. And the ways that we can look into that is by graphs, so we get a glance. And when the journal will be published, I'll send you the link to it. So by organizing keywords related to learning into overarching themes, categories, and examples of case, the analysis will help us better understand how and why these patterns emerge in the corpus, and if and how they relate to the transformation of MET from a vocational program to an academic education. Then I have one more example. And this is a brand new project called AR in the Kongsberg School. The project aims to explore and pilot AR learning activities based on international and Nordic research by building on collaboration with relevant competence environments in the Kongsberg region that integrate practice and industry for work-oriented use of AR technology in upper secondary schools. Some of you probably know Qualtech. Empirical and theoretical research will create a basis for identifying and developing models that can contribute to better integration between practice, research, and the industry's needs for future labor. And the pilot project will thus respond to a publicly stated need for knowledge and arises from a need to further develop and renew work-oriented education in upper secondary schools in Kongsbergskolen with AR/VR technology and innovative learning methods. However, the work also aims to pioneer work for innovation of AR technology in the education sector with a focus on value creation, competitiveness, and knowledge building in and across practice, research, and the industry's future needs in the Kongsberg region. And I'm really happy to see Anna here today. I know many from the Kongsberg industry cluster were here yesterday. And Anna is going to lead phase number 2. Dag Bremnes is the project leader. He's working in Kongsbergskolen. He's leading phase 3. And I'm leading phase 1, and we'll just quickly look into it. Phase 1 means that we're going to develop a scoping review of international and Nordic research on integration among educational practices and industry on vocational or working life-oriented use of augmented reality in upper secondary schools. And the reason why we want to review international and Nordic research is that the Nordic countries has come quite far in working on these kind of integrations. However, we know little about the international field so far, and probably they also use other words and other concepts. So this is going to be a really interesting work, trying to understand and conceptualize what happens. What are people interested in when they investigate these kind of collaborations across practice, science, and industry. To establish collaboration among resources with relevant competence at the University of Southeastern Norway, Kongsbergskolen, and the Kongsberg region's cluster program for AI technology. That is what Anna is responsible for. Very happy for that, Anna. You know the Kongsberg region very well. So this is go to Anna if you'd like to join us. And 3, we would like to pilot a vocational or a working life-oriented teaching program using AR in Kongsberg upper secondary schools. So these 3 phases are working together, and they're building on each other. So it means that the collaboration is both necessary and the collaboration is very fruitful because we can use each other's competence in order to be innovative and do this in better ways. So the scoping review will provide a common knowledge base for lecturers, researchers, and industrial developers about what we know about the use of AR technology in work-oriented professional education, and form a further basis for a phase 2, where we want to establish this collaboration with relevant competence environments. And the purpose is to establish lasting collaboration between researchers, lecturers, and industry who both develop AR and who will be future employees for students in upper secondary schools in the Kongsberg region. In phase 3, we want to develop this pilot, and it's going to be an innovative and work-oriented teaching program. And the idea is not only to create a pilot, but to create models of how we can create these kind of learning tools and activities in order to use it both in secondary schools, but maybe also in the teacher education programs at our university. The project will thus lead to enhanced collaboration between practice, researchers, and industry, and provide opportunities for students to have knowledge of technology that they will encounter in the future working lives. So I would like to end this presentation with this quote. Students do not stop learning upon leaving the school building. And I think this is quite interesting, particularly when you know that so many youngsters and children and students, they do a lot of things outside the walls of the school. And I think if we can create and make use of their experiences and knowledge in better ways, I think we can enhance this environment and start to create other learning activities and assess them in better ways. Thank you.